on to the next segment, which is about stress learning and the role of the advisor. We're going to do that by listening to about a 20-minute segment of an episode of the podcast This American Life. Any This American Life fans in the audience? Okay, good. And this one is called Back to School. It is about a book called How Children Succeed by Paul Tough. Has anyone read that book? Great. Awesome. Will you tell us a little bit about it?
So it's basically a book that's based off of grit and character, and it talks a lot about how students learn in different ways and how without these particular characteristics, students can't be successful. So it's just basically them learning in different ways, and then it's just different aspects as well, because they talk about a report with the mice where it's like showing students love and how that changes the way they start learning or trying.
Great, we're going to hear about that today. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, he also spoke at Xavier. We went to the same.
Oh, great, okay.
And he was just saying that when he was taking his kid to school, I think it was kindergarten or preschool, he's like, don't tell me if my daughter daughter or son is learning their letters. Tell me if my child doesn't help another child when they're crying. So he puts an emphasis on character, and then he brought up some schools that have like a character report card where they get graded on their academics, but also on how they are. And it's like all these different types of things that make up their character.
Awesome. So at Generation Schools Network, we like to talk about whole student development as academic, personal, and professional competencies, right? So it's really important that when we're in school, we learn math and reading and writing and history and science and all of these academic things. We need to be able to synthesize and analyze and compare and contrast. But if we're really going to be successful in school and work and life, we also need these personal and professional skills. We need to be curious. We need to know how to interact with our teammates. We need to know how to collaborate. So this book is really about that whole other part of education, the science behind why it's important and how it helps people be successful. This segment in particular talks a little bit about stress, and this rat study that was mentioned is going to come up. And the importance of having mentors and people who advocate for you and care for you and look out for you. While you are listening, if you could take notes in 4 boxes, so there's paper in the center of your tables. If anybody doesn't have a pen and need one, just raise your hand and Leslie will help you out. But if you can have a box for your aha moments, so something you're listening to that you just think, wow, that totally resonates with me. I really get what they're talking about. Relevant personal or professional stories. So that really reminds me of this student or this time in my life when emotions. So advisory is an emotional space, right? As you start getting in a little deeper with your students, they will bring things up that are emotional, and you'll experience your own emotions. So definitely want to hear about the emotions you're experiencing as you read this. And then a box for any questions that you have. Okay? So we're going to listen to about 20 minutes. We're going to listen in 3 different segments, and we'll do a little reflection activity after each of them. The other thing I wanted to mention is in this segment, they use the term non-cognitive skills. And if that sounds foreign to you, just what he means by, Paul Tough means by non-cognitive skills are all these other things that aren't academic, right? So not are you good at math and reading and writing, but all these other skills that we talked about, like creativity or perseverance, those other types of skills that we need to be successful. What really jumped out at you? What really resonated with you? What put some science behind some of the things you've been experiencing in your classroom? Nick.
Parents go to jail.
Great. Not great, obviously. But yeah.
Homelessness.
Homelessness.
Just deaths in the family and different people.
Yeah. Dealing with loss. Especially, what if that loss happens in a violent way, right? Talking about kids who are losing family members to murder or drugs or, things that seem really preventable and unjust. Yes?
Deportation.
Deportation, absolutely.
or family members being deported.
Mm-hmm. Yep, or the threat of that happening, the fear of that happening, right? There's some of our children who live there every day being afraid that their parents could be taken away from them and not be a part of their lives. And what does that feel like?
Just the communities that they come from can be scary places.
Yeah, say a little more.
Well, they might not be in a safe neighborhood. So just the struggle from getting to school.
Great.
Luckily, we have buses, but when I was younger, I'm from Chicago, and that's like a big thing.
Right.
We celebrate 8th grade graduations because it's sad to say that 8th grade is important because a lot of students may not make it to 8th grade.
Right.
Due to the violence that's in the community. So I can imagine there's communities in Cincinnati that are also pretty similar.
Absolutely.
Well, think about when they hear a car backfire, something that sounds like a gunshot, and all of a sudden they dive to the floor
Right.
because that's what they do.
Right. Yep. And so I guess I wanted to talk about those, and those are things that in your conversations with your students that maybe come up at advisory, that come up in one-on-one conversations. But I think one of the things that segment of this story does is put the context behind how those things impact a student sitting in your classroom, right? When you're talking about that constant fight or flight response, how your brain is actually changed if you're constantly in this state of stress. That when a teacher looks at you and asks you to focus on something and perform a certain task, and you're in this kind of pent up state of fear and stress, maybe that's why some of our students lash out at us when we think, gosh, all I did was ask him to take out his pencil, right? So remembering that and thinking about that when you're in those tough situations with your students, I think is really important. And I think advisory gives a space to kind of process some of that, and we'll talk a little more about that as we continue to listen. So you guys can keep taking notes in your boxes. You can still add aha moments, even though we already talked about those. And we're going to listen to another segment now. And I want you to talk about the personal experiences or the professional experiences you've had that you've thought about while listening to this show so far. Yes?
What year is this? In what city or state?
Okay, so this radio show came out in 2012, right around the same time that Paul Tuff's book was published. And I'm not sure, Kawana's story, I'm not sure where she is. The radio show is based out of Chicago, so I'm not, my guess is it might be Chicago, but I'm not sure actually where that student is.
I'm listening like that's something they did back in the 70s.
The Wings, the Wings
school.
program, yeah. And I mean, honestly, I think you'd be surprised, there are lots of rules and regulations around special education, but people aren't always implementing them the way they're supposed to, right? So anyone that wants to share what they heard or what they shared with the whole group? Did anybody want to share with the whole group what you were talking about?
We'll go ahead and share. We were talking about associating certain names with students in regards to stupid, dumb, and retarded. Those are words that not only are have negative connotations to us, it also plays into the self-esteem of students when they're put in small group instruction or small groups and things like that. So we have to try to eliminate that, and then also their teachers, and not all, that do inclusionary teaching, that instead of learning why that child is acting out or has a behavior problem in the classroom, I'll just put them on a computer, put them over here, and not hold them accountable for the work in the classroom instead of trying to figure out what that behavior is. Why are they acting out, to help them, to help modify that behavior so that they can receive the same instruction as the rest of the class. Because all the time the intervention specialist is not going to be there to help modify that behavior. To help do the checklist. So what they did to this young lady is putting her in this wings program because her behavior was out of control. They didn't take the time now to figure out what was the triggers for the behavior to eliminate them.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have one more segment to listen to. Again, you can keep taking notes in all 4 boxes. And this last segment is more about some of the scientific research. We're going to hear about the licking and grooming rat study that you mentioned, and what Ira Glass says at the end is something that I think about this whole book, How Children Succeed, which is this is the science that backs up stuff that a lot of us already know because we work with young people and this is our everyday reality, right? But it gives you this scientific understanding of what you're seeing and experiencing in your classrooms. Okay, good. So one little activity before our break, which is to think a little bit about your answer to the question that the radio show host poses, which is, what else could the school system do? What will work? He's talking specifically about Kuwana when he asked that question, but thinking about the students you know, the students that do experience all kinds of stress in their lives, these traumatic experiences. And we've talked a lot about students living in poverty, but you know, I think those of us who know students, even who grow up in affluent conditions, have their own forms of stress, right? Maybe the situation is that, you know, mom and dad are out working all the time and they still don't have that attachment, even though maybe they have a lot of other comforts in their lives that their less affluent peers don't have, right? So what could the school system do? What will work? Thinking about those attachment studies, looking at 3 levels. So think about what your school can do as a whole, what you can do in your classroom, and then what you can do one-on-one with students.